What is an idea? An idea is something that can be born in your head, but alas, it will never materialize and see the light if you do not do anything for it. Today we will tell you about a man who proved with his work that an idea with a huge desire can come true. Appearing in this world as the fruits of a huge faith in himself and his strength. Our hero was born on February 24, 1955, and his life did not go well from the very beginning. Even as a child, his own mother refused him and gave him up for adoption. But the guy was not without a home for a long time, and after a while he found a new family. He was adopted by a married couple, Paul and Clara Jobs. They could not have their own children, so they decided to take someone else's child and raise him as their own. Once in a new family, Clara and Paul gave their adopted son the name Steve. Surprisingly, Stevie has been uniquely gifted as a boy since childhood, combining incredible adventurism, curiosity, and having incredible research potential. As time went on, Steve grew like an ordinary boy, but closer to the age of 12, he himself and his new parents began to notice that he was madly attracted to electronics. And one day he showed himself willing to help a physics teacher by assembling an electric current frequency sensor for the study. For many, this is just a set of incomprehensible words in adulthood, but Stevie was already interested in it then. The only thing he faced was a shortage. He did not have all the necessary details available. Most of us would just give up on this idea, but not our hero. The kid found a rather unusual solution. Taking the phone book, the boy just called William Hewlett. Perhaps many of you, having heard this name, realized that the person on the other end of the wire was the CEO of the well-known HP company. Can you imagine that? A 12-year-old boy did not lose his head, plucked up the courage and called someone who could just laugh in his face and end the conversation without even listening. But Steve still managed to surprise William. After 20 minutes of conversation, he sent the driver to the boy with all the necessary details. He found their dialogue very entertaining. And closer to the summer, Steve went to HP for an internship, at William's personal invitation. Even at school, he got a friend by interest, with whom he did what he loved. Electronics united them into one common cause, where both, Steve Jobs and originated, could solder something for days. Later, they both attended lectures and took a joint internship at Vashbe. And after graduating from school, he associated himself with this company, but already as an engineer. Everyone who loves his job plunges into it with his head, giving his soul, all his strength and time, dreams of something. War dreamed of the idea of creating his own personal computer. Jobs took a different path and did not associate himself with the company where his friend worked. He joined Tara, but already in the role of a video game designer. However, the guy's enthusiasm quickly faded. Our Steve decided to leave, just giving up everything, while choosing the path of enlightenment to go to India with his hippie friends. As he later said himself, these were the days when everything finally gets boring. You want to take a one-way ticket and disappear from everyone. It was that very period of rebirth, vital for new forces and fresh ideas. He appeared and remained in the state, becoming at the same time one of the founders of Homebrew in the Computer Club, known only in narrow circles of radio amateurs. But the labors of the artist were not in vain. In 1975, he appeared and created what he had been striving for so long. The first prototype of a personal computer was proudly demonstrated to the company with which he associated himself back in the days of studying at school. But unfortunately, and to a huge disappointment, everything went wrong as planned and his brainchild was not approved. This upset the artist very much, but he tried not to stop and turned to Tara, where his friend once worked as a designer. But to even greater disappointment, the company also refused the originator, considering his inventions unprofitable and talkless, which would not bring profit. And as he recalled, people always tend to doubt something new. My invention in those days was no exception. Having suffered a fiasco due to the simple fear of people who prefer stability, which brings a steady income, and throwing away new items, Steve Wozniak was left with a broken trough. Naturally, he could no longer work in these companies because he did not see the point in it. It is not known how events would have developed further, but just at this time, when there was a suppressed and humiliated, our prodigal son and a hippie in one person returned from India. Of course, the first thing he did was to visit his comrade who appeared, and already he told him about his successes together with the failure of the brainchild. That evening they pondered for a long time, analyzing all the options, and having gathered the courage, Jobs offers to go his own and independent way while founding his own company. It was then that unknown guys from the outskirts began a new path in their lives, and as it turns out many years later, the path to success. On April 1st, 1976, Steve, reflecting and remembering India, listed all possible variants of the name Sitting with Friends at Home. And since Jobs got carried away with the Apple diet on his return from Andy, he suggested naming the company Apple. At the same time, the genius of Jobs did not disappoint. He clearly understood that the first letters in the name guaranteed to put them in a position higher than Atari in the telephone directory. And since there was no talk about the internet at that time, it was the telephone directory that was the guide between people and companies. At the same time, the first logo of the company was invented, depicting Newton sitting under an apple tree. But all this is only on paper. A product was needed, which is the crown of creation. And thus the first product was the development of the first personal computer that emerged, exactly the one that HP and Atari so successfully kicked off at the time. Apple I was exactly the name of the brainchild. This is the first serious sacrifice and investment of Jobs, because of which he sold his beloved van. As a result, it seemed as much as $1,300 in the hands of the guys, which became a very important and useful investment. The very first product of the company, it was necessary to start somewhere, and most importantly, if you start, it is clearly not in the open air. The team had no alternatives at this point, so it was decided to choose a living space as the first room. Jobs and Steve were living with their parents at the time. At the same time, Clara Jobs did not stand aside and even joined her son's team. She performed the duties of answering calls, which added prestige to their company and the appearance of a serious organization. Every company is an endless struggle with competitors. Our trio faced their first competitors, all their 8,800. It was assembled manually. The device had toggle switches with which commands were carried out. The answers that came out in the end were the subsequent combinations of light bulbs on the front panel. The more difficult the task, the more switching it required. Sometimes the number of switches reached hundreds or more. In case of an error, the user received an inaccuracy in the calculations, and then everything had to start from the beginning. But in those days, such a computer was ideally suited by scientists simply to those who wanted to touch the future. Having learned the story of this man, it's hard to imagine that an ordinary guy named Steve Jobs could become an icon of public speaking and a genius of his generation for millions of people around the world. All the most brilliant things are initially born in our heads, and here the big question is what each of us is doing to make these dreams come true. Friends, write your opinion. How do you personally feel about this person and his creation as a whole? Subscribe to our channel and we will go on a new journey with you. See you soon.